At 70, I can hear when a house is lying. Wood remembers every weight that's crossed it. Pipes keep the hours better than watches. A refrigerator hums truer than most vows. For 3 weeks straight, the same breath of sound passed my son's door at 12:17 a.m. A hush of cotton on wood, a patient hand on brass, the soft surrender of a latch. Just checking on him, my wife would say in daylight, a nurse's smile pulled tight at the corners. Love can sound like that. Gentle, practiced, unquestionable. So can control. I didn't accuse. Men my age learn that accusations make facts hide and lies grow teeth. I watched instead. Our boy, grown, taller than me, beard he still trims with the bathroom light too dim, had lined up interviews and then sat at the kitchen table saying, "They ghosted me," with a shrug heavy enough to break a chair. He set alarms, polished his shoes, ironed his shirt, laid out a pen like a talisman, and still woke up too late or no reply. In the evenings, my wife brushed crumbs from the counter and told him, "Maybe next time. The market's cruel." She stroked his hair like he was 5 and feverish. He believed her because the alternative, the possibility that his own house was dragging a net through his future, felt obscene. I started with the hallway. I know that floorboard like a friend. Third plank from the vent, the one that sighs under a careful foot and groans under a careless one. I stood there at noon and again at midnight, heel to toe, weight forward then back, mapping the sound to muscle. A house is a clock without hands. You learn to tell time by where it hurts. The board sang true. I wasn't dreaming. I bought nothing new. No alarms, no spy gadgets with suction cups. I used what the house already offered. The Flycus at the edge of the hall. Its crown cradled a small camera we'd used during my grandson's first steps. Harmless. A memory maker. I reset it, synced the time to the kitchen radio, and tucked the lens behind a fan of leaves that held still even when the furnace exhaled. I set the device to capture at night and to save with timestamps. If I was wrong, I'd delete the footage and apologize to the air. If I was right, the air would answer me back. Night 1. I sat in the living room with the television off and my hearing aids turned low, so the house itself could talk. The baseboard ticked once, the ice maker clicked. A car passed outside lifting rain from the asphalt in a sound like torn paper. At 12:17, the floorboard whispered. Soft foot. The plant shadow wobbled. The strip of light under my son's door brightened and then thinned to a blade, then a hair, then gone. I let the dark swallow the moment, and I didn't move. When the door closed again, I could have sworn the house inhaled. In the morning, I made coffee and hands that didn't quite belong to me opened the laptop. I scrolled to the time code. There she was. Gray robe, hair twisted into the simple knot she wears when sleep is work, not rest. She paused in the doorway and listened with her whole face the way only a mother does. She crossed to the bed. Our son slept on his side, arms loose, mouth slightly open, breathing with that deep ocean rhythm that the young keep like a spare set of lungs. My wife took his wrist with the care of a phlebotomist. The phone woke to his skin. She guided his thumb to the sensor as if returning it to a cradle. The screen bloomed. The camera didn't care for motives. It saw what it saw. Missed calls, voicemail badges blinking like quiet lighthouses. Bridge and Company HR, Morgan and Daughters, Caldwell Structural. She opened one. Listened 3 seconds. Deleted. Opened the next. Deleted. Settings bloomed next. The path was muscle memory. Block caller. Then a blue confirmation glow like a nod. Her fingers moved with the fluency of someone who has rehearsed kindness into an instrument. She didn't rummage, didn't snoop. She maintained. Then the banking app. Small numbers, small transfers. 35 here, 49 there. Linked account to household. The size of the theft was precisely calibrated to invisibility, like shaving a coin's edge and sliding it back into your pocket. She locked the phone, tucked his hand beneath the blanket, and stood there a breath longer than necessary, looking not at him, but at the doorway. Then she left, and the floorboard sighed its confession to the empty hall. My hands shook, not rage, geometry. The angles of our life rearranged themselves on graph paper in my head. We had explained failure with bad luck and timing. The math was simpler. Someone was pruning possibility at the root each night. Night 2, I listened for routers instead of ghosts. Men like me built entire decades on cables and blinking lights. Our generation doesn't trust clouds unless we can see the wire. I logged into the dusty router panel and watched the client list. At 12:16, her phone reconnected. At 12:17, the hallway camera buffered a little longer than usual. Packets don't lie. I printed the connection log and slid it behind the first page in a manila folder. Evidence, I wrote on the tab with a blue pen, and it felt like crossing a small private river. In daylight, I tested the world again. Any callbacks? I asked my son over eggs. He shrugged and said, "They ghosted me." Thin smile, thick silence. "Sometimes they do," my wife said, measuring salt like a scientist. Maybe it wasn't right. She looked at me then, not him. And I recognized the look you give a man who is about to say something foolish in front of a boy. I tried to remember her earliest checks. When our son was 6 and ran a fever, she stood over his bed like a lighthouse from dusk till sunrise. Once, after a surgery, she set alarms every 2 hours to lift the corners of his mouth with a straw so he wouldn't choke while drinking. Devotion like that carves neural paths you can never completely abandon. I wanted to give her that mercy, but mercy without truth is sedation. Night 3, she came with whites. She polished the phone's glass with the quick, tight circles of a jeweler. She synchronized his alarms the way a saboteur synchronizes a watch. 6 became 8. The draft email he'd written to a recruiter, 3 sentences, clear and hopeful, she nudged into a folder that had no badge and no sound when new mail arrived. A quiet graveyard with a polite name, later. I started setting small traps, not to catch her heart, but to catch her habit. I turned on hidden logging in his email, unobtrusive, the way a porch light watches a neighborhood. I created a new filter that would flag any change to the alarm app, and, if it happened between midnight and 1, would snapshot the screen to the cloud. I mirrored the hallway camera's signal onto my laptop with the sound off, so the house wouldn't hear me listening. Daylight again, and I walked the hall with my hand on the wall, feeling the screws under the paint, feeling age the way you feel weather coming through a joint. I straightened the frame of the family photo, the one where our boy is missing his front tooth, and my wife is laughing, and I'm pretending to steal the cake knife. That woman could hold a room steady with a glance. Somewhere between then and now, her steadiness had hardened into something else. Fear, maybe. Fear turns caretaking into custody. I needed one clean cut, not many nights. One, a blade of a moment no one could talk around. So I sharpened the moment myself. I pressed his suit, set it on the chair in his room, and laid a portfolio on top with copies of his resume and a simple black pen. On his phone, I scheduled an alarm for 5:50 a.m. and changed the label from Wake to Call Back Caldwell at 6. My hands ached in a way that had nothing to do with arthritis. I sent a test email from my account to his with a subject line recruiters actually use, on-site interview confirmation, and in the body wrote nothing that could be mistaken for spam or kindness. Just the logistics a life diverts around. Monday, 9 a.m., downtown, reply to confirm. At 12:17 on the dot, the floorboard confessed again. The door opened. She stood longer in the doorway this time, looking at the suit in the chair. The camera's low light washed her face into planes, but I could still read it, resolve overlaid with fatigue, purpose braided with worry. She crossed to the bed. Wrist, thumb, glow, unlock. The same choreography, the same practiced tenderness. She opened the email, read it, looked at the suit again, then at our son's sleeping face. For the first time in 3 nights, I hoped she would put the phone down. She lifted it instead. 3 dots. Options. Not delete. Too loud. Not reply. Too dangerous. Archive. That small, immaculate word. The message slid off the stage without drama or sound. She slid the alarm from 5:50 to 7:50, turned off the label, backed out, wiped the glass, tucked his hand beneath the blanket, like a secret beneath floorboards. I didn't breathe until she crossed the threshold. When the latch caught, something caught in me too. Not rage, a kind of solemnity men reserve for funerals and oaths. What I had was no longer suspicion or theory. It was a sequence, the same steps executed with the same timing for the same result, maintenance. In the morning, I moved like a man on loan from a steadier world. I poured coffee too full and drank it without tasting it. I tested the filter logs, took screenshots, printed router records, clipped them in chronological order with neat little tabs. 12:16 connect, 12:17 door, 12:18 archive, 12:19 alarm, so no one in any room could mistake the order of the dance. I printed the frames from the video and circled hands, timestamps, the sliver of light under the door. I wrote a short index because truth, like a good map, should save you from wandering. Then I put on my shoes and went outside and walked the perimeter of the house, hand on siding, eyes on the eaves, the way you do when a storm passes and you're taking inventory. The maple by the kitchen had dropped a limb, and I cut it clean, collected the fallen twigs, swept the concrete. The body calms when the hands do a simple job. I wasn't preparing for war. I was preparing for a conversation that would not permit shouting. I would not accuse. I would present. We ate dinner at 5:30, the way we have for years. My wife asked my son about his day, and he said, "Slow," and smiled with only one half of his mouth. She told him there's no shame in resting. I told him I'd found his old cufflinks, the ones shaped like tiny compasses. "Maybe you'll need them," I said. And he nodded like a boy graciously accepting a gift he'll never use. That night I didn't sit with the laptop. I sat with the folder and the plant, with the floorboard and the door, and with the strange, raw mercy of being right when you wanted to be wrong. Men my age carry a lot. Names, funerals, debts you can't pay with money. The heaviest thing I've carried is silence. I set it down, not with a speech, with a stack of pages and a time. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., the living room. The lights low, the sound on. Let the truth do the cutting. 8 p.m. The living room is a small courtroom. One table lamp, one folder, one husband who decided not to shout. I set the laptop on the coffee table and kept my voice level. "I want to show you something," I said. My wife glanced at the screen the way you glance at a storm through glass, confident the window will hold. The video began. A timestamp glowed. The hallway plant breathed leaves. She appeared in her robe, a gray shape with careful hands. Wrist, thumb. Unlock. Voicemail. Delete. Block. Alarm. Slide. When the screen went dark, the room didn't breathe. "It's not what it looks like," she said, because language has emergency exits. "It is exactly what it looks like," I said, because truth has stairs. I didn't list the nights. I stacked them. Exhibit A, the same movement at the same minute, 3 weeks in a row. Exhibit B, router logs with her phone waking at 12:16. Exhibit C, the email archive, 7 messages from recruiters, not replies, just confirmations, folded out of sight like good silver in a cupboard no one opens. Exhibit D, the banking trickle, 35 here, 49 there, always the day before he'd have to ask for help. She didn't blink at the technology. She blinked at me. "He's fragile," she said. "You can't push him like you push yourself. He panics." "He's not a pane of glass," I said. "He's a man. He's my son," she said. And in those 3 words was a lifetime of watchfulness, of night feeds and fevers, of surgeries with post-op coughs that scared the walls. Love doesn't vanish, it calcifies. "You work from certainty," she went on. "I work from what can go wrong. The world out there is not kind." I slid the next page across the table. "And inside here, is it kind to erase a future so it won't say goodbye?" She folded her arms. "You're 70. You forget things. Maybe you misread the time. Maybe you set that camera wrong. Maybe..." I put the printed stills in a neat line, her hand on his wrist, the glow on her face, the three-dot menu open like a mouth about to swallow a word. Maybe let's not call me confused to stay comfortable, I said, softer than I felt. Gaslight is still fire. Something in her face flickered. Anger or relief, I couldn't tell. The first dam in a river always looks like both. I never deleted anything important, she said, and stopped, because the word had betrayed her. Never. She knows I keep score on words like that. You archived it, I said. Silence that looks like absence. He thought he failed. He told himself the story you handed him. She sat back and stared at the lamp. Do you remember when he was 10 and went to that party? She asked. They played that game where you stand against the wall and let yourself fall backward. Trust. She laughed once without humor. Half the boys hit the carpet because no one caught them. He came home and told me he hated games. That was the night I decided I would always be the one behind him. This isn't catching, I said. It's holding. She looked at the ceiling, counting breaths. Do you remember the neighbor's boy? She said. College, promise, dead in a car 3 towns over at 2 a.m.? Or Nora's kid, went to the city, sent postcards, came back broken in a way you can't fix with soup and sleep. I see futures, not the shiny ones, the ones that eat you. Fear isn't prophecy, I said. It's a thief that pays in small bills. Her shoulders slumped. The robe collapsed a little around her. He panics, she said again. But now it sounded like a plea to the past. The last time he had an interview, he sat on the edge of the bed and shook so hard the headboard tapped the wall like a Morse code. He told me he felt like a fraud. I fixed things. I pushed it a week. I made it gentler. And then, she gestured in a small circle. And then it was easier to keep him safe than to let him break. Safe for whom? I asked. For him or for you? She didn't answer. That silence had edges. If she named it, it would cut us both. I opened the banking pages. The money? Her jaw tightened. He overspends. He buys coffee like it's courage. I move little bits so bills don't bounce. You were always so proud of balancing to the penny. Pride has nothing to do with it, I said. Dependency does. You shave his account, just enough that he needs to ask. And then you get to be the rescue. That's ugly, she said. It's accurate, I said. Ugly is what accurate looks like when it doesn't match the story. She traced a circle on the tabletop with her finger, as if polishing a mark only she could see. When your father left, she said, and the sentence surprised me because it wasn't the one I expected. Your mother learned to make disaster quiet. She kept food hot without asking when he'd be home. She folded shirts while the argument in her mouth froze into a smile. You called it strength. I call it the invention of pretending. I am tired of pretending. I won't pretend the world is gentle to men who stumble. End pause. The world is not gentle to men who never walk, I said. She blinked hard, and in that blink, I saw 10 versions of her. The young mother counting breaths over a crib, the 40-year-old memorizing dosage labels, the 58-year-old holding the phone when our son's first big chance called, the woman at the door at 12:17, convinced the most merciful act is to make the road shorter. Love as a leash, polished daily. What if he leaves? She whispered, and there it was, the hinge the whole house was mounted on. What if he gets a job and leaves, and never sits at this table at 5:30 again? What if it's just you and me, and the news, and 2 forks? What if he stays, I said, and it kills the part of him that could have been the man who comes back on Sundays because he wants to, not because he has to? What if our son learns that effort is a room with a door he isn't allowed to open? She stared at the lamp again. I lowered my voice. You're not evil. You're scared. But scared has been in charge for too long. I slid one last paper across, a list of numbers with contact names beside them, written in my slow, blocky hand. I called these today, I said. They remember him. 2 left doors ajar. One said the word impressed. Tomorrow morning, he can call back. If we don't stop you tonight, tomorrow will become last year. Her face folded once, then steadied. I can fix this, she said. I'll call them. I'll say it was a misunderstanding. No, I said gently. You won't call anyone. He will. You won't touch his alarms. You won't touch his phone at night. You won't move money. We will separate accounts by morning. We will change passcodes and turn off thumbprints. We will stop pretending that care is the same as control. She looked small and very, very old for a moment. Then she straightened. You think I'm a villain, she said. I think you're a mother whose fear found a smart way to hide. I said, and I think if we let that fear keep the keys, we lose our son, our marriage, and the part of ourselves that tells the truth. Stakes didn't have to be spoken. It stood behind each object in the room. Our son's confidence, the first stake. He had begun to look at his hands like they belonged to someone less capable. The second stake, time, because every archived email becomes a year you don't get back. A third stake, law, because there are names for moving money and intercepting communications that don't care how tenderly it was done. The fourth stake, marriage, because trust rots in quiet and rot spreads. I took a breath and laid out the plan, like I was reading instructions neither of us wanted, but both of us needed. Tomorrow at noon we meet with Mara. She looked up startled. The mediator, I said. Neutral room, no stairs to climb with old arguments. We'll show exactly this, no adjectives. After that, a therapist who knows the word enmeshment without looking it up. Tonight, I'll sleep in the chair in the hall. Not to catch you, to give you permission not to try. She closed her eyes. Do you think he'll hate me? She asked. I think he'll hurt, I said. Hate is a costume Payne wears at parties. We won't host that party. And if he leaves, she whispered, then we'll learn how to be two people again without breaking, I said. We did it before him. We can do it after. She opened her eyes, and for the first time since the video started, I saw her not as the midnight caretaker, but as the girl who once chose me because I wanted a family that told the truth, even when it was inconvenient. She nodded once, very small, like a pledge. I gathered the papers into the folder. I powered down the laptop. I set my phone on the mantle and turned the lamp a little lower, as if dimming the room could soften the shape of the night. She stood, paused, and then sat again. Leave the folder, she said. If I wake at 12:17, I want to put my hands on something heavier than fear. I left it, and I sat in the chair in the hallway and listened to the house try on a new sound. No sigh outside our son's door. No quiet crime dressed as care, just old wood carrying our weight while we learned how not to lie to it. Morning came without a 12:17 sigh. The hallway kept its breath. The ficus didn't blink. I made coffee like it was ceremony. Boil, pour, wait. My wife came in quiet and didn't reach for her phone. She sat with both hands around the mug, as if warming them on a small fire she wasn't sure she deserved. At 11:40 we drove to the mediator's office. Neutral space, low bookshelves, a desk that looked too light to hold heavy things, a wall clock that ticked with the steady authority of rain. Mara shook our hands and asked for the folder. I slid it across without commentary. She read, watched, scrolled. No soft words, no sharpened ones either. Just the professional hum of someone who knows a house can have a secret schedule. Okay, Mara said finally. Language matters. What you did, she nodded toward my wife, is interference cloaked in care. It has a name, enmeshment. The antidote to enmeshment is boundary. The cost of boundary is grief. She turned to me. And you? Her gaze didn't flinch. You've been quiet too long. Silence grows mold. From now on, facts first, feelings after. My wife sat very straight. I wanted to keep him from breaking, she said. And you did, Mara said. You prevented some breaks. You caused others. She wrote 3 lines on a yellow pad and read them aloud. No midnight access. No device changes without consent. No money moved without notice. Then she drew a box around the lines as if building a small fence with a pencil. We left with 2 appointments. A therapist who said enmeshment without Googling it, and a late afternoon slot with our banker. I carried the folder like a living thing. The reveal, when it finally came, was not a shout. I set the laptop on the coffee table and asked our son to sit. The lamp threw a warm wedge of light over the keys. My wife sat at the far end of the couch, hands folded so tightly the knuckles had their own weather. I pressed play. He watched himself sleeping. He watched his mother enter. Wrist, thumb, glow, unlock, voicemail, delete, 3 dots, archive, alarm, slide. The footage ended, and in the small silence after, the refrigerator motor made a sound like a held breath finally admitted. He didn't look at me. He looked at her. His first word was not anger. Why? My wife opened and closed her mouth twice. The third time, sound came. Because the world out there eats boys like you, she said softly. Because you panic. Because one more rejection and you would drown. He swallowed. It's my life. I get to drown or swim. We're gonna make it yours again, I said. I kept my voice even. Tonight, we reset the ground. The reset had to be mechanics before meaning, or we'd talk in circles until the house forgot which way the doors opened. We did it like a checklist so our hands would know what our hearts were still learning. Phones first. We sat together at the table with both devices face up. He removed every fingerprint but his own. We added a passcode he chose and wrote nowhere. 2-factor authentication went to his new email, not the old one we'd casually shared as a family for a decade. I called the carrier, and with his permission and on speaker, requested a SIM swap to a fresh card. Any authorized user tonight? The agent asked. Just him, I said, and meant a larger sentence. Email next. We restored the archive. The messages floated back into the inbox, like letters surfaced from a river. Creased, yes, but legible. He stared at subject lines, and I could see hope fight its way through learned resignation. I set a rule that copied every incoming recruiter email to a folder only he could see, and he set a calendar that chimed once at 8 a.m. and never at 12:17 a.m. Again, money then. At the bank, the air smelled like carpet cleaner and new envelopes. Our banker slid forms across the desk with the gentle finality of a nurse handing over discharge papers. We separated accounts. Autopays moved. The household debit card lost its quiet tether to his balance. I signed where signatures mattered. My wife did too. Notary stamp. Thunk. The sound of a habit losing jurisdiction. Back home, we turned to the calls. He hesitated at the first number. I wrote it again on the pad, larger. He dialed. Hi, this is... His voice dipped, then steadied. This is me. I saw there was a misconnection. He listened. His eyebrows went up. Yes, I can come in Monday. He hung up and laughed once, not from joy, but from the surprise of a door he had been told was locked, swinging open on well-oiled hinges. P. The second call scheduled a technical screen. The third asked for a portfolio sample he already had, trapped in a draft folder named Later. He sent it. We watched the whoosh on the screen and sat still, as if noise could scare opportunity back into hiding. At 8:50 p.m., we enacted the smallest, hardest ceremony. My wife handed me her nighttime keys. Not to the front door. We weren't exiling her from her home, but to the small kingdom she'd been ruling in the dark. Our son's room, his phone, our shared email, the household account logins. For a while, she said, until my hands learn how not to reach. I put them in the folder with the same respect I would give a flag. We slept. No sigh in the hall. At 5:45 a.m., his alarm sang. Real birds answered. He dressed without hurry, tied his tie twice, then once more for luck. My wife stood in the doorway of the kitchen with a glass of water and didn't cross the threshold. Watching her not move required more strength than any midnight mission she'd ever run. Do you want to ride? I asked him. I want to take the bus, he said. And for the first time in months, the word want had weight. He left. The house considered the space he took with him and didn't collapse. My wife sat at the table and set her hands palm down, as if practicing the shape of letting go. were two people learning a new sport at 70. Staying. He texted once, here, and again, in, and disappeared into an hour that would belong to him even if it ended with no. I went outside and swept the walk for the sake of sweeping. The sun slid up the shingles like a coin you almost dropped and then didn't. When he came back, he didn't fling the door or drag his feet. He walked in like a man who had done a thing in the open. He set his portfolio on the chair instead of the counter, sat and let silence fill with respect rather than dread. How was it? I asked. He smiled in a way I hadn't seen since he was 8 and built a decent paper airplane on his 5th try. They asked about the failure rate on a design I'd done, he said. I told them the truth and how I'd fix it now. They didn't flinch. My wife exhaled a prayer without language. I'm sorry, she said, and the words didn't fix or barter. They placed a weight in the right pan at last. I confused keeping you with keeping you safe. I won't do it again. He nodded. Not a pardon, not yet, but a receipt. We kept going. Therapy on Tuesdays. Mara's fence became a field map. We went from don't to do. Do ask before helping. Do sit with discomfort like it's a guest who will leave if you don't shove them. Do name the fear, and then let the person you love decide what to do about it. We wrote a family charter, the kind of thing I used to think lived only in corporate binders. 3 lines on our fridge, under a magnet shaped like a lighthouse. We don't touch each other's futures without consent. We don't confuse love with control. We tell the truth even when it makes dinner quiet. There were missteps. On a Thursday, she reached for his phone when it pinged, and stopped half an inch above it like a hand above a stove. On a Sunday, I started to answer for him when an aunt asked, "Any news?" and bit my tongue until I tasted iron and humility. He missed a callback once and wanted to blame us both by habit, then laughed at himself and called twice. A week later, the technical screen turned into an on-site. He wore the compass cufflinks. I didn't drive. I walked him to the bus stop and stood half a block away like a landmark that doesn't demand to be looked at. He texted 3 words an hour later that read like a bell. Phase 2 scheduled. Mara asked us about consequence, the sober side of stakes. What happens if the old pattern knocks? She said. We wrote that too, like fire code. If midnight interference returns, devices leave our bedroom for 30 days. If money moves unannounced, accounts freeze, and a third party audits the flow. If either of us gaslights, we pause the conversation and restart with evidence, or we don't restart at all. It wasn't romantic. It was plumbing. You stop a flood with valves and seals. Not poetry. The poetry comes later, when the house stays dry through a storm. That later did arrive. One night my wife woke at 12:17 out of muscle memory. She stood in the doorway and didn't move. I watched her from the chair and said nothing. After a long minute, she lifted her hands and held them in the air, as if to show an invisible audience that they were empty. She turned and came back to bed. We didn't call it victory. We called it practice. On a bright Monday, our son came home with a folder of his own. He opened it on the table and laid out a letter. Conditional offer, start date, probation terms, salary that would put air back in the month. He didn't ask what we thought. He told us what he had decided. I'm taking it, he said. I'll be home late the next few weeks, training. He looked at his mother. I'll call you, not because you're worried, because I want to tell you how it's going. She nodded, tears in her eyes but not in her throat. I will answer if I'm awake, she said. And if I'm not, I'll hear about it in the morning. He laughed and hugged her. He hugged me too, hard. I felt bone and effort and the clean heat of a person carrying his own weight. We celebrated clumsily. Paper plates, a store cake, because none of us trusted the oven not to turn triumph into a smoke alarm. My wife lit a single candle and didn't make a wish. She watched him blow it out and clapped once. Softly, like you do when the best part is not the spectacle, but the air that follows. Later, When the house returned to its evening size, I took the folder labeled Evidence from the top shelf. I didn't burn it. I didn't need symbolic fire. I put it in the filing cabinet under Taxes and Warranties. Unromantic neighbors for a document that had saved our marriage's load-bearing wall. If someday we needed to remember what unkind care looks like, we could open a drawer instead of reopening a wound. We did change one lock. Not the front door. The small brass key on the hall closet, where we used to store just-in-case devices. The old baby monitor, the spare cameras, the adapters we promised would keep us connected. I replaced it with a keypad and gave the code only to the future. If we needed those tools again, it would be for birthdays and first steps, not for quiet sabotage dressed as concern. On the first Sunday after he started, he came back around noon with a bag of bakery rolls and stories about a manager who knew the difference between pressure and cruelty. We listened. We didn't improve his sentences. We didn't attach helmets to his verbs. He ate 2 rolls and left a third on a plate as if to claim the table without chaining himself to it. When he left, the door closed and the house did not lie. It told the truth. We had raised a person capable of departure and return. That night, at 12:17, I woke for no reason and lay there, counting the same 60 seconds that used to carry the shape of a crime. The hallway stayed still. My wife's breath found its old, even pattern. The one from long ago nights when we took turns walking a colicky infant around the dark and believed the future would arrive if we just kept moving. I reached for her hand under the blanket. She squeezed once, twice, our old code for I'm here, I'm staying. We had not fixed everything, but we had turned off the quiet machine that made a son smaller to keep a house from feeling empty. At 70, I learned the heaviest thing to carry isn't age, it's silence. I put it down. And when it hit the floor, the old board in the hall didn't sigh. It held.